All right, Rabbi, good morning. Say, maybe a little bit louder. Yeah, I think. Good morning, Chaver. Let's Emir Hashem begin. Beautiful daf ahead of us today. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of the month of Shvat. To thank Mrs. Bracha Strimber for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this month in memory of her husband Avram ben Kalman Eliezer Halevi Zichron Levracha, and to thank Ayala and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating all the Shirman this month in the Schus of Refuah Shalema for Shulamis Bas Susha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, Nisham will have an Aliyah, the family in Nechama, and Shulamis Bas Susha have Refuah together with Kol Chole Yisrael. So with that, let us begin. So we have a lot to do today. Actually, not really that much to do today, but we have a lot to do today, like in the existential level. There's always a lot to do. The daf itself happens not to be a very long daf, but a very interesting one nevertheless. So remember again, today's daf is Daf Vav, page 6, in Meseches Nazir Haba Alinu Latova. So incredible. So we are picking up a Meretz Hashem, 3 lines up from the bottom, Hey Amud Beis. 3 lines up from the bottom, 5b. So again, just to reorient ourselves a little bit, we are in the midst of a dramatic machlokes between Rav Masna and Bar Pada. What's the machlokes? I will say the machlokes is in the very essence of Nazirus. Specifically, Mishnah introduced us to the idea of a concept of a stam neder Nazirus. Person goes ahead and makes I'm Harini Nazir, but doesn't attach a time frame to his neder Nazirus. So of course the shaila becomes, how long is a person a Nazir for? So the Mishnah said 30 days. Stam neder Nazirus is 30 days. There's a machlokes Rav Masna and Bar Pada. So what does 30 days mean? So Rav Masna says 30 days means exactly that, 30 days, based on an interesting gematria of Yihiyah. Yihiyah, fine. Bar Pada said no, in fact, and Stam Neder Nazirus is really 29 days. 29 days. Now, by the way, you'll ask yourself, so what does Bar Pada do with the Mishnah that says Stam Neder Nazirus is 30 days? Okay, it's not complicated, because in Bar Pada's model, remember again, the active Neder Nazirus is for 29 days, and then what happens on day 30? You bring all of your concluding sacrifices. So kind of when you look at the Neder Nazirus, the process is a process for 30 days, but the active vow only lasts for 29. Shabbos said this is the fundamental machlokes. So here we go. So Tnan, we learned Mishnah, Nazir Beis Nazirus, interesting case. Mostly we're going to learn about this. Let's say a person takes on 2 consecutive periods of Nazirus. Okay? So a person says, Hareini Nazir. We'll discuss this. So essentially a person becomes a Nazir for 2 consecutive periods. So what's the halacha? So Megalechas Harishon Yom Lamed. So I will say, so interestingly enough, he goes ahead and at the end of the first Neder Nazirus, he takes his haircut on day 30. I'm sorry. Megalechas Harishon Yom Lamed Ve'echad. Portuguese. He takes his haircut on day 31 for the first Neder Nazirus. And he takes his haircut for the conclusion of the second Neder Nazirus when? Day 61. Shabbos said this works out beautifully for who? Bishom Rav Masna Necha. According to Rav Masna, that's great. Because remember again, according to Rav Masna, a Stam Neder Nazirus is for how long? 30 days. So therefore again, Nazirus number 1 is for 30 days, haircut day 31. Nazirus, for second Nazirus is 60 days, or another 30 days, haircut day 61. Works out perfectly. Top of Ella, le Bar Pada kasha. But Bar Pada, this is going to be a question, because according to Bar Pada, I will say, really, when should the haircut take place? Day 30, not day 31. Because according to Bar Pada, ultimately, again, the Nazirus itself, the active vow, will last 29 days, and the haircut, or concluding rites, take place on day number 30. No, Ema Seifa. Look at the end. Look at the Seifa of that Mishnah. What was the Seifa of that Mishnah? And if indeed he took his haircut for the first Neder Nazirus on day 30, he concludes the second Neder Nazirus on day 60. So Bar Pada says the Seifa works like me. So Bar Pada says the Seifa teaches you that halacha l'maisa, you can go ahead and observe Neder Nazirus for 29 days, then haircut on day 30, and similarly again 59 days, or day 59, and then haircut on day 60. Ella Seifa, Mesayele. So we'll say, that's fine. I understand that the Seifa goes ahead and helps Bar Pada. But still, I'll say we're faced with the fundamental problem, which is what? What do you do with the Reisha? In other words, Barpada, the Mishnah is a unit, so what do you do with the Reisha? Because the Reisha, remember again, is the one that said that if a person took 2 consecutive Nidre Naziros, he takes his haircut for the first one on day 31, haircut for the second one on day 61, which supports Rav Masna against Barpada. So Barpada, what do you do with the Reisha? Not a problem. Ba'omer Shleimin. So we had this in yesterday's daf as well. So we'll say, even Barpada will agree like this. Barpada himself says that if a person says, Hareini Nazir, unquiet, without attaching a time frame, how long is a person Nazir for? Barpada? How long? 29 days. According to Barpada, right? 29 days active Neder Naziros, and then again, on day 30 is when you take your haircut, concluding rites. That's Barpada's model. Barpada would agree that if a person were to say, Hareini Nazir, Bishil Shloshim Yom Shleimin, I am a Nazir for 30 complete days. How long does a person become a Nazir for? 30 complete days. I will say, remember again, our discussion over here is really on the floor, not the ceiling. What we're going to see is when you become a Nazir, we're going to see the Rambam, we're going to see when we finish the Sugya, there's a minimum amount of time for which you could become a Nazir. Anything above that minimum, you have the ability to stipulate. So Barpada is going to say, look, when a person says Harini Nazir, what you've done is you've become a Nazir for 29 days. Right? And then day number 30 is the day that you bring your concluding rites, your haircut. If a person says, I'm a Nazir for 30, I'm an active Nazir for 30 days. I don't mean I'm an active Nazir that like I jog every morning. In other words, I'm a Nazir, I'm in a state of, I want to just give a little feedback to this year. Somebody listening to the podcast said, Rabbi Silber, you're hilarious. How come no one laughs at your jokes in Shir? Okay, good. I said it's very simple. I said, I know this person. I said, you listen to the Shir at 10 a.m. Right? Everyone else is listening to the Shir at 5:45 a.m. Right? I could be Modi sitting up there giving daf. It wouldn't make a difference, right? Anyway, so the Gemara says as follows. So we'll say, Barpada will say that the Reisha ultimately is Shleimim, where a person is actively saying, I'm making the neder for 30 days. So a person makes a neder naziros like that, even Barpada would agree that such a neder would work. Beautiful. Rav Masna kasha seif. I suppose here's the problem. So now, what does Rav Masna, who holds that a neder naziros is 30 active days, what does he do with the seifa? Because the seifa says, if you took your haircut on day 30, it works. And if you take your haircut on day 60, it works. But then you would only be observing a 29-day duration of Naziros. So according to Barpada, that's absolutely fine, but what does Rav Masna do with that? So Amar Rav Masna, Kidiktani Seifa. So also Rav Masna says, here's the difference. The Seifa explains, Yom Shloshim Ola Lakan, Ulakan. I will say very interesting. So Rav Masna says, no, the Mishnah already explains this. We'll say, we had this again. We've seen a lot of this already in yesterday's daf. That day number 30 works both ways. Day number 30 has a dual identity. In other words, in the case of consecutive Neder Naziros, day number 30 will act as what? The last day of Neder number 1 and the first day of Neder number 2. Based on the concept, Maihi Mixas Hayom Kikulo. So once again, we saw this yesterday. Mixas Hayom Kikulo, part of the day counts as the whole. Now, I will say, we see this concept, I spoke about this also yesterday in Shir, we see this concept in many areas of halacha, most notably, right, Avelos, by Shiva. We know that Shiva is 7 days, yet again the halacha is that all one has to do on the 7th day is sit for a little bit of time, and then Shiva is concluded. What about the Miktsas and Kekulo? Part of the day counts as the whole. There are other examples of this in halacha as well. But again, the Gemara is suggesting over here that according to Rav Masna, the Seifa is coming to teach me that on day number 30, once you observe part of day number 30, that ends off the first vow and ultimately effectively becomes day 31 as well for the next vow as well. To which the Gemara says, Ha'amra chadazimna. But we already learned the concept of Miktusim Kikulo. We already spoke about that. To which the Gemara says, Ma'udatema, what would you have thought? Hanimi le'inyan chad naziros. I would have thought Miktusim Kikulo only works for one Neder Naziros. right? Because Rabbi say, what would Mitzvah Kekulo do for one Neder Naziros? Essentially, it says that once you've observed part of the day, you've observed the whole day. But I would have thought, Avalishte Nazirus Lo, but I will say perhaps I would not apply the concept of Mitzvah Kekulo for 2 consecutive terms of Nazirus. I will say, now why not? This is actually very interesting. You see, when you go ahead and you say, let's say I'm Harini Nazir, right? I become a Nazir, and now again, I get to day number 30, we say Mitzvah Kekulo. No problem. What does that tell me? It tells you once I observe part of the 30th day, it's ki'ilu what? I've observed the whole. See, I would have thought this concept applies in one Neder Naziros, but not in 2. Because Rabbi say, what happens when you say Mitzvah Kekulo in 2 Neder Naziros? Essentially, that one day almost has like a dual identity. Right? It's going to be like the conclusion of the first duration of the first term and day number 1 of the second term. Now that's a big chiddush. Because then what you're saying is one day could potentially have a dual identity. Kamashman, the Gemara says that it does. Kamashman, that Mitzvah Kekulo works for both days. Or I should say, works in both cases. Both in the case of one Neder Naziros, as well as for 2 consecutive terms as well. And I will say, again, we're going to see that Halacha L'Maisa, a lot of these things that we're going through over here don't actually apply, but nevertheless, it's quite fascinating to go through the process. So it's none. Shabbat say again. So just to orient ourselves, we are still steeped in this machlokes of Bar Pada and Rav Masna, namely about what is the minimum duration for a neder naziros. So again, Rav Masna telling me 30 days. 30 days of active observance of naziros, and then day 31 is when you would bring your concluding rituals and rites. Bar Pada, 29 days active naziros. Day 30 is when you'll bring your karbanos, cut your hair. Fine. So that's still a machlokes, and we're trying to prove, disprove. So the Gemara goes weiter. Tanan, im gilach yom shishim chasra echad. We'll say if a person, again, in the case that we had of 2 consecutive nidrei nazirus, right? So a person went ahead and cut his hair on the 59th day. Shishim chasra echad. Yotza. Ultimately, again, you're yotzei. Sheyom shloshim olelo min minyan. Because day number 30 ultimately counts towards what? Towards the second neder naziros. Shabbos say that's beautiful. Bishtom Rav Masna necha. According to Rav Masna, that works. El bar pada lamali lamali. According to Rav Pada, what it needs ha'amar shloshim chaser echad. So I'll say according to Rav Masna, according to Rav Masna, I understand why the Mishnah has to make the exception. But according to Rav Pada, this is the way that naziros normally works. To which the Gemara says, "Amalacha ana nami aha samchi." Rav Pada says, "Oh, this halacha." This is the source for my psak. This is the source for my psak. See, I will say, I do want to point out something very interesting. If you notice, by the way, when the Gemara introduced us to Bar Pada and to Rav Masna, if you notice that halacha l'maisa, the Gemara didn't really give us Bar Pada's logic, right? Rav Masna's logic was Yihiyeh, a gematria. When it came to Bar Pada said, Kineged Nazir Nizra Morim Batorah. So Bar Pada said again the number of mentions in the Torah, but the Gemara poked some holes in that. So the Gemara says, so Bar Pada has that drasha, but now in addition, Bar Pada says, this Mishnah that we're quoting over here, this is actually the source for my Psak Halacha. Okay. Tanan, Misham Hareini Nazir was another very interesting case. So again, we're not finished yet. We're still in this machlokes Bar Pada and Rav Masna. So Misha Amar Hareini Nazir Nit Mayom Shloshim Sosr Asakol. So we're gonna talk about all of these cases in Peretz Hashem, which are all quite interesting. So we'll see. This is actually just in about 10 days from now. We'll get to this. So Misha Hareini Nazir. Person said, "I'm a Nazir," and what happens? Nitma Yom Shloshim. So we'll say, now watch this. Let's see, we're dealing now with the case of where a guy says Hareini Nazir. So what happens if you say Hareini Nazir without attaching a specified time frame to it? 30 days. Fine. On day number 30, the Nazir becomes Tameh. So what's the halach over here? So the Gemara says, Nitma Yom Shloshim, Soser Es HaKol. You have lost the entire Neder Nazirus. So in other words, you have to start all over again. So says the Gemara, so Bishno the Rav Masna Necha, Ela Bar Pada Kasha. So I will say this makes perfect sense according to Rav Masna. Why? Because according to Rav Masna, how long is a Neder Naziros? How long is active Naziros? 30 days. So when you become Tameh on day number 30, you have become Tameh in the midst of active Naziros. So it makes sense, therefore, that what? That halacha l'maisa is going to have to start all over again. But according to Bar Pada, how long does active Nazirus last for? 29 days. If you become Tameh on day number 30, what should happen? What should happen? Nothing. In other words, you'll have to go through the process of becoming Tahar for your Tumah, or it's Paraduma, whatever else, but Lamaisa, Legabi, your Nazirus, you've effectively ended your Nazirus. Now I was saying, let me just clarify. Everyone agrees that if you took upon yourself an Ed Nazirus, and then after the act of observance ended, you became Tameh, even if it's before you've offered up all of your requisite karbanos, everyone agrees, for now, everyone agrees that you don't have to repeat an Neder Nazirus. The only time you have to repeat a Neder Nazirus is if you become Tameh during the duration of the act of observance of Nazirus. So Rabbi says, so now over here in our case, Nazir becomes Tameh on day 30. The Mishnah says, gotta repeat the whole thing. So that means that on day 30 is still the period of active Nazirus. According to Rav Masna, makes perfect sense. According to Bar Pada, it's a kasha. Amr Beis Rabbi say. So Amr Lecha Bar Pada will say 1 second. Ema Seifa, look at the Seifa. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Eino Soser Elo Shiva. Very interesting, Rabbi saying. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, you don't lose 30 days. Rather, what do you lose? 7 days. Rabbi saying, now where do we get 7 days from? Take a look at Rashi on the top left. So we'll say, where does 7 come from? Because remember, the case we're dealing with over here is the guy's becoming Tameh. What type of Tumah? Tumas Meis. How long is the process for purification from Tumas Meis? 7 days. 7 days. So we'll say, it's very interesting. So it's like a shtickle arbitrary, but Rabbi Eliezer is coming along and saying, no, you don't lose 30 days, you just lose 7 days. 7 days. So in other words, you'll have to make up 7 days of Nazirus, corresponding to the 7 days of the purification process. So here's the problem I will say, that this doesn't seem to shtim at all. So watch this. So I don't understand. Lemaisa. So if you hold that a stam neder nazirus is 30 days, so I don't understand. If you become tameh on day number 30, you should have to repeat the whole thing. What are you talking about 7 days? So this is fascinating. Kasam Rabbi Eliezer mixas hayom kikulo. Fascinating. Rabbi Eliezer says, isn't this incredible? Rabbi Eliezer says, no, we'll say, what's the case? When did you become tameh on day number 30? When did you become tameh? Sometime after day number 30 started. Obviously, if you're becoming tameh on day number 30, that means day number 30 started. So Rabbi Eliezer holds mixas hayom kikulo. Therefore, what does that mean, Abba? What does that mean? That as long as you observe part of the 30th day, then what's happened? It's as if you've observed the entire 30th day. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, in reality, the active duration or the duration of your active Nazirus is already over. He is just kind of throwing in it almost seems like a shtickle penalty that you're going to have to observe another 7 days corresponding to the 7 days of Tumah. But he will not make you repeat the entire duration. Why? Because effectively you've finished the duration of your Nazirus because Mitzvah Yom Kikulo. Incredible. So Tanan was another case, Tanan, Hareini Nazir Mea Yom, interesting case. I'm a Nazir for 100 days. I'm about to say in this case over here, so a person is actively making this declaration. I am a Nazir for 100 days. So what's the halacha? Nitma Yom Mea, he becomes Tameh on Yom Mea. Right? 100 days. We'll say, what happens if you become Tameh on day number 100? Right? In other words, you made it all the way. It becomes Tameh on day 100. So what happens? Nitma Yom Mea, Soser Es Hakol. Okay? We'll say that's that. We'll say, by the way, you understand the Musar Haskell in that? The Musar Haskell is, what's the Musar Haskell? Something's not done until it's done. So let's say, you know how this happens in life for so many of us, is that we start on something, we're all excited, and then kind of once it gets almost done, I'm like in my mind, almost done? Like mitzvah siyam kikula, right? Almost done is done. And I will say that's why in life so many of us have things that we start, whether it's projects, ruchni projects, gashmi projects, and like we started, and we get it to a state where it's like kind of done, and we let it go, and we let it go, and life is filled with these almost done type of projects. And what the Gemara is teaching us, I'll say, is no, something's done when it's done. That's why again we're going to see, I'll say that halacha l'maisa, the Gemara talks about this, that the Torah gives Yoshua, the Navi gives Yoshua credit for going ahead and burying the Atzmos Yosef. But Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who took them from Mitzrayim, carried them for 40 years. It's true, but he didn't get them to Shechem. Who got the remains of Yosef to Shechem? Who at the end of the day, who buried the remains of Yosef? It was Yoshua. It was Yoshua. So Gemara says, we're going to see this. Hakol holech achar hachitum. Right? Everything is dependent. We're going to see actually in Mesilas Yesharim. Everything is determined by how you end. So you both say, and it's this interesting dialectic in Yiddishkeit. Right? On one hand, we place incredible focus on effort. On effort. So sometimes because I don't control the conclusion, I don't control the end. So the good news is Kadosh Baruch Hu says it's okay. Even if you can't deliver results, you could always deliver effort. So we say that on one end, and then we'll say, what do I say out of the other side of my mouth? It's all about results. It's all about results. So which one is it? Is it all about the effort, or is it all about the results? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. And I'll say, and again, it depends. There are some situations in life where I don't drive the results. In those situations, all that is incumbent upon me, as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Lo alecha hamalacha ligmar. Sometimes I can't bring the task, whatever the task is, to the finish line. I can't, for a variety of reasons. In those situations where I can't bring it to the finish line myself, that's fine. The results are not on you, the effort's on you. But I will say there are so many other times in life where I am capable of delivering results. If I'm capable of delivering results, then ultimately success is only defined by crossing the finish line. Effort is not enough. You have to be a closer. You have to deliver. You have to cross the finish line. So the Gemara says, it's incredible. It's incredible. Come on, the guy's on day 100. That's fine. You're almost there. But when are you finished? When you're finished? When you're finished. And I will say, it's a big mussar for us, because sometimes in life we start on things, and usually when you start on something in life, it has that new initiative smell, right? That new relationship smell, then whatever that newness is, and then the newness wears off. I lose interest and I move on to something else. I move on to distracted focus. Like we saw yesterday, I get distracted. Right? So again, the Gemara is saying, finish it up. Whatever you started, finish it up. You're not finished with your Neder Naziros until day 100 is completed. V'haraya, you become tummy on day 100, you lose the whole thing. The Gemara goes like the Rabbi Shmuel says, no, it's fascinating. You only lose 30 days. 30 days, not the whole thing, only 30 days. So I don't understand. We just said it before, Rabbi Eliezer holds mixus yom kekulo. That I will say, if you mix yom kekulo, then what does that tell you? What does that tell you? That therefore, once he began day 100, it should be like what? He completed the day in its entirety. So at the end of the day, why 30 days? In other words, again, Rabbi Eliezer says, what do you have to repeat? 7 days. Why 7 days? Corresponding to the process for Tara from your Tumah. But where does 30 come from? To which the Gemara says, Nistar Shiva. So go find, observe 7 days. But if you don't hold Nistar Kekula, the part of the account is the whole, then what? Listar Kulu. Then you should lose the entire 100. To which the Gemara says, the Olam Lo Aminon Miktsasayom Kekulo. I just say, so listen to this. Realize it really holds? No, we don't hold Miktsas and Kekulo. Part of the day does not count as the whole. So one second. If that's the case, then when the Nazir becomes Tameh on day 100, what should be the halacha? You should have to repeat the whole 100. Ihachi listar kulu, so you should have to repeat the full 100. Reish Lakish Hayun Tam Rabbi Eliezer Amar Kra Zos Toras HaNazir Biyom Melos Yemei Nizro. This is fascinating, Josh Rabbi said. Rabbi says like this. This is the halacha of the Nazir Biyom Melos Yemei Nizro. Rabbi say, So let me just tell you Pasha Pshat. Pasha Pshat in the Pasuk is the Torah is telling me about the process that the Nazir has to undergo when he completes his Neder Naziros. That's the Pasha Pshat. This is the law of the Nazir. Biyom Malos Yemei Nizro. When he goes ahead and he finishes his Neder Naziros. Rabbi Eliezer is a fascinating drasha. He says, HaTorah Amra Nitma Biyom Malos Teino Toras Nazir. Rabbi Eliezer, this is wild. So Rabbi Eliezer says, here's how you read it. Zos Toras HaNazir, right? This is the halacha of the Nazir. If he becomes Tameh on the Yom Malos, so what happens if a Nazir becomes Tameh on the day on which he concludes his Neder Naziros? What should you do? Yemei Nizro. Impose upon him, Yemei Nizro, the days of his Naziros. Rabbi say, what's the minimum definition of his Yemei Naziros? 30 days. 30 days. Therefore, Rabbi Eliezer will say, wild drasha. Rabbi Eliezer says, therefore, if you have a guy who says, I'm a Nazir for 100 days, and he becomes Tameh on day 100, first of all, we're now saying Rabbi Eliezer does not hold Miktsas Hayom Kikulo. So why doesn't he have to repeat the full 100? A special drasha. If you become Tameh on Yom Malos, on the concluding day of your Naziros, we simply impose upon you a minimum duration of Naziros. You don't have to repeat the whole thing, only 30 days. Incredible. To which the Gemara says, now again, I just want to point out, we're still back where we started, right? This is all interesting, right? But Lamaisa, we are still in this machlokes, Rav Masna and Bar Pada. Is the minimum duration of a Neder Naziros 30 active days of Naziros like Rav Masna, or 29 active days of Naziros like Bar Pada? To which the Gemara says, maybe the machlokes Rav Masna and Bar Pada is in fact a machlokes Tanoim. What's the machlokes? Here we go. So the Gemara says, Ad Malos Hayomim. The pasuk says until the conclusion of the days. So watch this. So the Gemara says, Shomani miyot yomim shnayim. So now, what the Gemara is saying is like this. This phrase of Ad Malos Yomim is indicating to me a minimum duration for Naziros. So what is the minimum duration for Naziros? So Shomani, miyot yomim shnayim. Rabbi say, so Yomim, what's the minimum definition of Yomim? 2 days. Talmud Lomar, Kadosh Yiyeh, therefore, both say the pasuk Kadosh Yiyeh, Gadol Pera Sa'ar Rosho. He'll be consecrated, or it will be consecrated, the growth of his hair. And Ein Gidul Seyar Pachos Mishloshim. They both say the growth of hair only becomes something significant after 30 days. After 30 days, Divi Rabbi Yoshia, we'll say these words Rabbi Yoshia. So we'll say, so Rabbi Yoshia is saying, minimum amount 30 days. Rabbi Yonasan Omer, Einot Sarech. Rabbi Yonasan says, no, you don't need this. Harihu Omer, Ad Melos Yamim. Right? Until the conclusion of days. So the Gemara says, Havi Omer Shloshim. And I will say, where do you find a unit of days that have to be filled out? Ultimately, again, these are 30 days. Which 30 days? The 30 days of the month. Now, I will say, it's actually very interesting. So ultimately, again, Rabbi Yonasan says, this lashon, the fact that the Torah goes ahead and by Nazir uses a lashon of Melos Yamim. Now, Melos Yamim means literally, again, days which become filled. So Rabbi Yonasan says, what's an example of days in a unit that become filled? See, interesting enough, what could it be? Days of the month. Because we'll say the days of the month are filled in different ways. Meaning what? Sometimes the days of the month are 29 days. Sometimes the days of the month are 30 days. So I will say, see, Rabbi Yonasan says over here that halacha l'maisa, so again, I will say, just you're asking yourself, what's the connection between Naziros and the days of the month? What Rabbi Yonasan is really focused on over here is the lashon of Melos. Melos means male, complete. So where else do you find a unit of time that is completed by a certain number of days? And the answer is the month. But here's what's interesting about the month. The month could also be completed by how many days? 29. So I will say, so this is the fundamental machlokus over here between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi Yonasan is saying like this, look, the pasuk says Melos, but it doesn't define it. So what's Melos? Well, there's a modifier. What's the modifier? The modifier is Gadel Pera Sa'arosho. enough time for his hair to really grow out. What's the minimum amount of time it takes for the hair to really grow out? 30 days. Therefore, again, Rabbi Yoshia says, Stam Neder Nazirus is 30 days. Rabbi Yonasan, on the other hand, says the lashon of Melos is to fill up a certain number of days. We'll say, where else do we find the concept of using days to fill up a certain unit? Days of the month. When it comes to days of the month, you could have a 29-month day. So as such, we see that even 29 days is the filling of a unit. So Melos could even mean 29 days. And we'll say again, therefore, Rabbi Yonasan says that a Stam Neder Nazirus is going to be 29 active days of Nazirus. Beautiful. To which the Gemara says, My love, Rav Masna da Amar Rabbi Yoshia, Ubar Pada da Amar Rabbi Yonasan. So I will say, Sobe Pashtos, Rav Masna is going to say like Rabbi Yoshia. So remember again, Rav Masna, who said that a Stam Neder Nazirus is 30 days, 30 active days, he'll hold like Rabbi Yoshia. Ubar Pada da Amar Rabbi Yonasan. And Bar Pada, who said that it's 29 active days of Nazirus, he will hold like Rabbi Yonasan. To which the Gemara says, Amar lecha Rav Masna, no. Kule alma shloshim ba'inan. Rav Masna says, no, you're wrong. Everyone agrees that a Stam Neder Nazirus, is going to require 30 days. Everyone agrees. So what's the machlokes here? Very interesting. V'hacha ba'ad bichlal. They will say here the machlokes is, in general, I will say when you count days, does the count include the final day or not include the final day? I will say we have this machlokes, this concept, this principle manifests itself in various machloksim throughout Shas. Essentially, ad va'ad bichlal means up until and including. Ad v'lo ad bichlal, up until and not including. So Rav Masna wants to suggest everyone agrees that a Stam Neder Nazirus is going to extend for 30 days. So what's the machlokes over here? The machlokes over here is, do we say ad va'ad bichlal or ad v'lo ad bichlal? How does this come up? So here we go. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yoshia Savar, Rabbi Yoshia holds, Rabbi Yoshia Savar, ad v'lo ad bichlal. Rabbi Yoshia holds up until, but not including. Rabbi Yonasan Savar, ad va'ad bichlal. And Rabbi Yonasan, on the other hand, holds that halacha l'maisa, ad va'ad bichlal. So take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, it's Rashi 2, 4, 6, 8, about 12 lines up on the bottom. Rabbi Yoshia Savar, the haydich siv ad melos, ad lamid mashma, v'lo shloshim bichlal. So we'll say it's very interesting. Rabbi Yoshia holds that when it says ad melos means what? Up until 30, not including 30. Therefore, Rabbi Yoshia holds, we'll say, therefore, according to Rabbi Yoshia, you need Gadol Pera Rosho to teach me that what? Day number 30 is included as well. That it's through number 30. So again, Rabbi Yoshia in his essence holds ad v'lo ad bichlal. So Melos would teach me up until 30 days. Gadol Pera Rosho, the growth of his hair, teaches me that day number 30 is included as well. Look at the next Rashi. Yonasan Savra ad va'ad bichlal, v'lo itzrich la megadol pera, di'ilu me'ad melos hayam naka. Rabbi Yonasan, on the other hand, holds no, ad va'ad bichlal. Therefore, ad melos means up until and including the 30th day. Shabbos says, so Rav Masna totally destroyed this. So again, the Gemara wanted to show that the machlokes Rav Masna and Bar Pada was in fact a machlokes Tanoim. Comes Rav Masna and says, no, everyone agrees with me that halacha l'maisa, again, it is, a Stam Neder Nazirus is 30 complete days. The machlokes between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonasan is ultimately, again, in ad va'ad bichlal, ad v'lo ad bichlal, and how they dash in the respective psukim. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Amar Mar, so the Gemara says, good, Amar Mar, so we'll say, so now the Gemara goes back to the drasha. Right? Rabbi Yonasan said, originally in the Havamina, Rabbi Yonasan was saying like this. The Torah, when it speaks about the Nazir, says that it calls the duration of the Neder Nazirus Melos, a completion of days. And originally Rabbi Yonasan wanted to say, what's an example of a unit of days which complete, or I should say, what's an example of individual days which complete a unit of time? The example was a month. And originally in the Havamina we said, Rabbi Yonasan showing that, what do you see from here? That since a month could be 29 days, therefore Melos for Nazirus could also be 29 days. So the Gemara says, one second, why is it only the days of a month? Why is it only the days of a month that represent individual units that make up a whole? Maybe it's a week. In other words, a week is also made up of individual days. So the Gemara says, Shabbos mi'iga chasirusa. It can't be Shabbos. Also, why? Because Shabbos has no deficiency. In other words, there is never a week that is less than 7 days. Right? So, in other words, that's the idea Rabbi Yonasan was focusing on, was the notion of melos, something male, something that is complete. Right? When you call something male, what does that indicate to us? That it could also be chaser. In other words, something is only called male if it could be chaser, right? Because otherwise, if it can't be chaser, I would say it's kind of like you could only call someone a tzaddik if they have the ability for what? To be a rasha. In other words, the level of tzaddik is meaningless if there's not an alternative, right? Our light is only meaningful because there's choshech, right? So the idea of calling something malay, calling something malos, is only meaningful because sometimes it's complete, sometimes it's not complete. So therefore the Gemara says, malos cannot refer to the unit of time of a week, because a week is never chaser. There are weeks that we wish were chaser, right? There are definitely days I wish it was Friday, I wish it was Shabbos, but l'maisa, you can wish it all you want. Today is 7 weeks, and that has not changed since Ma'aseh Bereshis, right? They're not going to change. Therefore, a week can't be malos. Top of Zion, ve'ema shana. Interesting, what about a year? Shabbos said, this is fascinating. To which the Gemara says, no. Because mimaninu yomi, it will say, a Jewish year, right, our calendar is not counted by days. It's not counted by days. Mimaninu yomi, v'hara abanam de kesari amri, minayin shemonin yamim l'shanim. But I say, how do we know that we don't count days towards the month? Shene'amar l'chodshe hashana, because the pasuk says the Chodesh the months of the year. Chadoshim echashim l'shanim v'lo yom l'shanim. So both say this is incredible. So halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says we don't count days towards the year, right? How many days are there in a year? The truth is it could depend. I mean, now the calendar is fixed, but it could depend. It could really depend. So I will say, so therefore again, we count 12 months during the year, or 13 months in a leap year, but we don't count days. Therefore I will say, kind of circling back, so therefore in Rabbi Yonasan's drasha of Melos, in the Havamina of the drasha, so when the Torah calls that Nazir is Melos Yamim, Melos Male, that tells me that therefore again it's linked to a unit of time, which is sometimes Male, sometimes Chaser. What's the only unit of time in halacha that is sometimes complete, sometimes incomplete? It's only a month, right? Because it's never a week is always 7 days. It's never a year, because a year is always a requisite number of months. The only unit of time that is sometimes mali, sometimes chaser is a chodesh, is a month, sometimes 29 days, sometimes 30 days. Good. So that brings to us the conclusion of the sugya, with only one problem. How do we pass it? All right, one little detail. So we had this whole beautiful machlokes between Rav Mastir. I want to point out, sometimes machlokes is beautiful. Right? Sometimes machlokes is beautiful. What kind of machlokes is beautiful? Machlokes l'shem shamayim. Right? When there's a disagreement, when there's dispute to figure out the Dvar Hashem, as long as it's done with shalom, with mutual respect, mutual admiration, it's the most beautiful type of machlokes in the world. So now we have again machlokes Bar Pada and Rav Masna. So what do we do? So we'll say, here we go. The Rambam to the rescue. So the Rambam in Hilchos Nazirus, Perek Gimel. By the way, I'll make a suggestion to you, just if you have time. If one of the things that's very helpful, especially with Daf Yomi, is what we always try to do is do it halacha l'maisa. Obviously, we're skipping a whole bunch of steps in the learning process, from going from a Gemara to a Rambam, a Gemara to a Shulchan Aruch. But if you have time, like if you have a couple of minutes, it's kedai to just begin to learn through the Rambam's Hilchos Nazirus. Just start. You could pick it up on Sefaria. You could even get English. I think it even has English translation for the Rambam on Sefaria, right? So you could see it all there, and it's just a great way to kind of familiarize yourself with that. Again, we're going to go through everything pertinent, but again, everyone's looking for some additional reading here and there, right? Rambam Hilchos Nazirus is actually some light reading. It's some light. You don't have to even get into the Mefarshim. So listen to this. We'll say. So Perek Gimel, Stam Nazirus Shloshim Yom. Rambam Paskins like Rav Masna. A Stam Neder Nazirus is for 30 active days. Ketzad, Mi Shama Harini Nazir in Pachos Mishloshim Yom. Right? So halacha l'maisa. Person says, I'm a Nazir. By definition, there is no neder nazirus less than 30 days. No neder nazirus less than 30 days. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, it's 30 complete days, like Rav Masna, and any karbanos, the shaving of the hair, everything else done on day 31. Shabbos the Rambam goes on, he gives other examples of this, but that's what we need for today. Now, what about the miktas yom kikulo? Right, we'll say, so what happens if someone becomes Tamei on day number 30? So we'll discuss this more. So we paskin that by Naziros, we do not say miktas yom kikulo. Right, now again, when you have consecutive Nidrei Naziros, we'll talk about that later on. We'll get into that again more later on. But halacha l'maisa, if you become Tamei on day number 30, again, we'll see this also explicitly, you have to repeat the whole thing. So we'll say, what I will point out is something very interesting. That by Naziros, it may be that halacha l'maisa we don't go ahead and paskin miktas yom kekulo. So I will say, but I will tell you that so that's halacha l'maisa. Hashkafa l'maisa, we definitely paskin miktas yom kekulo. We'll say, what does that mean? Sometimes a person has a really bad day, and I don't just mean like a bad day, like work wasn't good or this that. I mean like as an individual in my ruchnius. It was just a really bad day. Happens to all of us. And I will say, sometimes I'm coming to the end of that bad day, and the only thing that compounds a bad day is when you are fully cognizant of the fact that you had a really bad day. Right? And so sometimes a person is oblivious. Okay, so that's fine, they don't know. I will say, but it happens to all of us, right? I have a day where I really messed up. I made some significant mistakes. And I am not happy with where I'm holding as a person. So we'll say, so what do you do, right, when you recognize that? So we'll say, it's incredible. What do? You pull yourself together and you do something meaningful on that day. Salvage the day. Whatever it is, open up your Gemara and learn. Do an act of chesed. Give tzedakah. Whatever you need to do to infuse some type of positivity, you have the ability to turn the day around. I will say, no, I don't. Right? It's 10 minutes before Shkia, 10 minutes before sunset. The day is almost over, and I messed up most of it. I will say, how do we paskin? Mitzas hayom kikulo. Sometimes all you need is a little bit of positivity in order to spiritually salvage the totality of the day. You're right, you can't go back in time. But lamaisa, mitzas hayom kikulo. Sometimes a little bit of positivity, a little bit of holiness, a little bit of ruchnius, even in a really bad day, has the ability to salvage the day in its totality. So we might not pass in mitzas hayom kikulo by Naziros, but be'inyane hashkafa lamaisa, we always pass in mitzas hayom kikulo. We'll stop here. We're going to do Mesilas Yesharim now for a few minutes. Finish off in Meretz Hashem the parak in Mesilas Yesharim.